Okay, I think we're live. Well, recording. Hello to my brothers and sisters at TOT and to the viewers that come to TOT, who would also be brothers and sisters. And I just want, this is kind of a reply because I have a thread on the One Truth forum about John Lash. Feature basically the latest ones he's doing, the radio Giainym, which is more of an outreach. This is what his follow-up to his the 64 plus videos of the Mandela Effect Decoded that he did. And I'm doing this because John Lash is a controversial person because of the way people hear him. I don't find him very controversial, but I don't get triggered easily. I understand what he's saying, and I also have the input from Sophia herself through different kinds of journeying and in the way that she speaks to me, and she can speak to anybody if you acknowledge her and then work on opening up that channel. It gets better all the time, and some people might have amazing success and access immediately. So part of it is, I guess, the message and the messenger, and then also the difference between the Sophianic narrative and then the commentary and all the extra that goes with that, which is a lot of what people hear John doing these days. He delivered the Sophianic narrative in, I guess, 3 different ways. One is that he wrote the book not in his image. So that's the first delivery. And then he did many interviews with Lisa M. Harrison and on Red Ice and multiple people whose names escape me at the moment. And they're not important because they're out there, where he delivered the Sophianic narrative. And it's also on metahistory.org under the Sophianic narrative. So 2 of them in written form, and then multiple times he's done it in what I like to think is the best manner, which is in the oral tradition. So rather than being gathered around a campfire, we get it digitally in the form of conversations he's had with people. I consider that to actually be the superior fashion, but for some, reading might work for them. The reason why I like the oral tradition is because that's how we did things before writing came to us. And writing, learning to become literate was a double-edged sword. It certainly developed our left brain capacity, but it started to shut down some of the more holistic nature of our right brain. It also allowed for editing. In the oral tradition, everybody had heard it over and over again. If somebody deviated, there could be correction. So, the essence of John Lash, I mean, the most important thing to focus on is the Sophianic narrative. I've had my own confirmation of he was the intended one to receive it. And I got that when I was preparing myself, and I've had some no recorded conversations yet, but we've experimented a little bit, and John is traveling. And also this last moon cycle, the lunar cycle, has been particularly intense. And those of us who have this practice, and I started to practice this last new moon, and it's been quite a ride. So in my preparations for how I could be, I sought the guidance, the instruction of our mother. And instead of me getting instruction on me, I got a delivery of information about John, some of which I will share and some which I won't. Some I really feel I should only share with John or with very close friends in a very private setting. But what I got is John was intended. This is what I was told directly. He was born the same year that the Nag Hammadi texts were discovered. The Nag Hammadi texts are a blend of Judeo-Christo-Gnostic thought. So it isn't Gnostic in any real sense of the word, although there's Gnostic throughout it. It's almost like a Gnostic adaptation to the new systems. First, the Judaic system, and then the Christian system that had arisen by the time the Nag Hammadi texts were written in Egypt, in other areas of the Levant, but largely in Egypt, where Alexandria was one of where the library and was a big mystery school area. But it was also the largest population of Jewish scholars and Jewish people outside of Judea itself, because by that time there was, Israel, the kingdom of Israel, because there was two separate kingdoms, had ended, around 700 BC. The kingdom of Judah had been taken into Babylonian captivity, but after Cyrus the Great took over Babylon, they were actually given funds and even some protection to go back to Judea and rebuild the temple. But it seems that there's a lot of, we won't need to get into that. Anyway, so John was born at the same time those texts were found. And my personal intel, was that that's not a coincidence. And coincidence is something I think we've all come to know, that what looks like coincidence is often some two dots or more that we need to connect. And whether or not I connected them, I had some connections, but some of them really got elucidated for me through, the instruction I was given by either our mother or one of her very wonderful infernal witches who are teachers. So I have a personal gnosis of that the Sophianic narrative is as was intended, as our mother, as Sophia intended it to be delivered. And then there's all of the work that John does that needs to be done, as that expands the Sophianic narrative and allows us to come into some sense of what it all means. And as anybody who does any kind of shamanic work, shamanic journeying, very often knows that you get you get anything from dictation to pictures to packages, and that's why one of the terms that's kind of entered our modern lexicon, especially when it comes to shamanic and other inner journeying, is unpacking. And unpacking can be done alone. I really believe unpacking is best done with other people who journey and get similar packages. And very often the intent was that somebody gets this part of the package, somebody gets this part of the package. You unpack them together. We have different perspectives and a greater whole comes out. And unpacking things can take time, because there is not only the unpacking, there's actually the right way to unpack. Sometimes this has to come off first and then that, and sometimes it's this way. So that's just the unpacking. And then what's inside the package sometimes needs assembling. And the assembling often comes with no instructions. So you kind of have to figure out how those parts fit together. And sometimes there's not even a picture of what it's supposed to look like. And of course, then you have to kind of journey on your package for proper unpacking instructions and then assembling instructions. It can be a long, not tedious, but actually a very fun and growth promoting process. And probably the most controversial aspect of one of the things John has delivered is that the Kalika War Party. And I have to admit, I find a bit of cognitive dissonance because people are alarmed by this. Now, and the thing is, they are alarmed by somebody giving voice that there are very bad actors on our planet, that the planet would be a lot better off without. And this shocks people, and sometimes even horrifies them. And meanwhile, there's not even one body to count yet. Meanwhile, many of us in the English-speaking worlds have our governments. In the United States, we have a government supporting Saudi Arabia and what they're doing in Yemen, where there is a weekly body count of at least tens. And over the course of this Yemen campaign, it's into the thousands. And I don't hear the shock, the real horror. I don't hear people like, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. But they react to that when they hear about somebody speaking about using magic or sorcery to remove bad actors, and the kind of actors who are creating the misery in Yemen. That is severe cognitive dissonance to me. I totally appreciate the concern that people have. Ooh, killing. I think, killing is serious business. But again, there seems to be no horror over our taxes killing people in Yemen. And I hope people can see why, when I look at that, I'm like, okay, we got thousands of bodies stacked over here, 0 bodies stacked the other way, and people are reacting in horror to the talk of maybe a few bodies will result from that. Furthermore, immune system. The earth is alive, and we are part of that life. And when the original traditional nature-loving societies were confronted by new systems of connecting to the cosmos, I'm going to be real gentle here, there was no immunity because there had never been a really organized campaign to stomp people out, to kill them for what was inside their head, and then how they might, the outside practices of how they showed that reverence. And in many ways, those who write history have kind of made sure that any of these groups who might have gone south in their own ways, and the Phoenicians and Canaanites might have some pretty unsavory practices. But there were whole swaths, especially in Europe and many parts of Mesopotamia, where that was not the practice. And usually the practices where it was kind of most prevalent was where there was some form of kind of city-state. And city-states are known for being dysfunctional. So much of our reference, even for how to think of the world before monotheism, is skewed. It is written by the people who exterminated the people. So we should suspect that there could be some misrepresentation or cherry picking, where there's no misrepresentation of the individual instances that are cited, but are these cited instances what the majority of people were engaging in? Even the word pagan is very misunderstood. because pagan comes from the Roman word pagani, which meant the people who worshipped nature or revered nature and interacted, because it really was a reverence, not a worship. And the Romans who called these people, when this name calling started, this was done by the polytheists who had their temples and their, you could call them official gods. In Rome that would be Jupiter and Venus, the planetary names, Mars. And so those were the sanctioned. Those were the sanctioned gods. They were not, and of course they threw in a few, nature gods, but they weren't the primary ones like Demeter, Ceres, Persephone. They were not the big ones. They were not the official ones, and the Romans tolerated some of that because they kind of came up with it, and they had to give some kind of credence to the nature that all of this arose out of. So even that is an interesting story, but not about John Lash. So let's get back to John Lash. So I really feel that much of the shock and horror over the concept of the Kalika War Party, who I see as the beginning of an immune system. Or, that's from an internal point, and if you want to see it externally, the use of antibiotics. I don't think anybody who has a fungal infection or a deep infection that could lead to sepsis and maybe even loss of a limb gets all horrified when they kill the infection. What the Kalika War Party wants to do is deal with the infection on the planet. And the infection, I think part of people are not being nuanced enough sometimes and realize that this infection has basically infected people with human DNA, but not human spirits. In many ways, kind of like zombies, except they don't act all goofy. So, and we've been very well trained from Hollywood and TV to how we're supposed to perceive how somebody who is possessed looks like. If they, dress well, they don't look possessed, do they? But all you have to do is look at the fruits and the behaviors, and you're going to go, gee, they really don't seem to like most of the humans, and they really don't like the earth because they're destroying it. So they're really, in the Kalika War Party are the T cells that any human body that is deficient in is in bad shape. Much of the reason why the world, not the and partially the planet. And I want to make a difference. There's the Earth, Gaia. All right, that's our planet, and then there's the governments that are upon it. That's the world. Now there could be a natural world on our planet, but there isn't. The city-states and governments, kings and queens and things like that, that's not natural. It represents an infection, and we really have to just kind of realize that an infection that isn't dealt with will keep on taking more and more healthy tissue until the host is no longer able to deal with the infection. So I really believe there's some nuancing and some understanding, and I'm hoping that this video will get there. I see I'm getting to 20 minutes, and I think I can be able to wrap it up in 20 minutes. The crows that you hear are part of a recording I made in my tent some years ago when I was still at Omega, and that's what I'm using so you're kind of hearing the transition from the night sounds, and you can hear the cawing of the crows, so you know that the day is breaking. So I just would ask people to maybe reconsider the Kalika War Party. And also, there are some people who wonder, gee, why did Sophia pick John and not a woman? Well, in our spirits, we're androgynous anyway. And also, the patriarchy has had a horrible effect on on the divine feminine, to the point where there's plenty of feminine, including feminism, but the divine feminine and feminism have nothing in common. Feminism is a political kind of concept, started originally, as Aaron Russo said in his interview with one of the, I forget which Rockefeller it was, but that Rockefeller informed Aaron Russo that this was something that they began because they wanted more tax money, they wanted the family to be broken up, and they were quite successful. So when we think of feminism, please realize that those who hate us are the ones who began it. And they had fertile terrain for sure, because they have abused women. So this kind of false light of feminism was very appealing, and I understand that. But we are where we are, and now we can look at the mistakes we've made. And anybody who's following John knows we are in Sophia's correction. So this is the time for us to correct ourselves, get ourselves together, for men to understand the divine masculine, and for women to understand the divine feminine. And we don't have many hints in the modern world to guide us. But we can guide each other, and we can be doing our inner work. And I guess in closing, when it comes to, sometimes John will have a strident tone. And this is where something like the Dunning-Kruger effect, which I try to presence on what's coming up, and I try to presence it on the forum. But there may be people who think, well, I'm doing my inner work, and the Dunning-Kruger effect may be going on there. In other words, there are people who think they have capabilities that they currently are making up a little bit. That's why I urge you all to some caution about whether you think I'm authentic, but I wouldn't if I didn't, and I am really quite self-critical. It's why I've done very well in my private life. I am in constant correction. I consider myself a very competent driver, and occasionally I'll do something and I'll go, oh man, that was a dumb thing to do. Let's not do that again. And that's, kind of a form of conscious competence, where, you are aware you're competent, but you keep an eye out, and you look for where you could improve it, and keep on upping one's game. So I think I'll close on that. I'm hoping that there'll be a better ear for what John does, but one of the reasons I do my Can't You Hear Me Gnostic is to kind of bring the Sophianic narrative to people in the way that I can do it. I'm not a teacher. I am sharing the teachings of John Lash. And in that sharing, I think that perhaps something good can come of it. As I shared somebody I've known for 3 years, I've spent much time with her, 10 days at a time, sharing this information with her for 3 years. And it was recently, she said, I watched that a John Lash video about the Sophianic narrative, and she said, I cried multiple times for it, and now I have never felt more clear and connected than I do. So I just, somebody said, it's about, there's a message and there's a messenger. And I would like to say that the message, which is the Sophianic narrative, the commentary is a little bit, and I think the commentary is good, but it is the Sophianic narrative, our creation and origin story, that is what is absolutely clean and certified by our mother. At least that is has been my instruction, that has been my gnosis that I share with you. Make it of it what you will. So I hope that some people will take the time to spend 25 minutes and listen to this, and I hope I've done a decent job. So my love to all of you, and may we reclaim this planet again and enter the dreaming, and then construct a world that is not antithetical to the dreaming and the vision of our mother. Be well.